Hello, lovely. This is Into the Hen House, a podcast for moms with littles. We are joining our voices to a revolution of remembrance. And as mothers, we are rising together and choosing to live, birth, and mother from a place of internally sourced power and deep connection. Join us on this journey as we dive into topics of mindful and intuitive living and mothering, healthy and sovereign living, as well as the often taboo topic of birth trauma, both healing and preventing it. We are your hosts, Andrea,
Caitlin,
and Chantal.
And if you're ready, it's time to jump into the hen house. Hello, welcome back, everyone. We are officially into season 4, which is super exciting. And I have a really wonderful guest here. This is Autumn Robinson, and she is, let me see if I can get this right, an internationally board certified lactation consultant.
You did it.
Yes, yes. I was like, I have to say the whole word because otherwise I'm like IB and then I lose it.
Yeah, that's my husband does the same thing. He has no idea what I do.
But I'm super excited, and this is such an important topic. I know for the three of us moms who are kind of involved with the podcast here, we are all super very pro breastfeeding. Think it's absolutely amazing. 2 of us still are breastfeeding. One of us stopped just a little bit because her kids are older. But just definitely like huge supporters of that and really wanting to give all moms the best chance that they have to do that for their babies, especially if that's something that they want to do. And so Autumn is absolutely amazing. So she was my lactation consultant and gave us our first huge win after what had been a very much more complicated and traumatic birth experience than what I had ever been anticipating or hoping for or planning for or preparing for. And so it was just, and after a lot of discouragement and people telling me that, oh, you're not going to be able to breastfeed, or oh, this, or oh, that, or whatever. And she came over and was absolutely amazing and really got us on the right path and really supported us hugely. And so I am just super excited that she is agreed to come on the podcast and talk about breastfeeding today.
Favorite topic.
Yeah. So let's dive in. So straight off the bat, because this is what I hear so much is I'll say to, or my husband Simeon will say to patients or whatever, say, hey, you know what, like you should get a lactation consultant, and we have like the most amazing one for you. And most often the initial response is, well, I had a lactation consultant in the hospital and like I'm not sure that that's going to be very helpful because they weren't helpful. And so, and I can say from my experience in the hospital, lovely people, at least one of them, but like they breezed into the room. They were like, your baby should be eating this much, and then they breezed back out.
Yeah.
There was no, they didn't look to see how was she latching.
Yeah.
They didn't say, like, how is it going? They didn't say, ooh, here's how we can help you transition from donor milk to all your milk. Like there was no discussion of that whatsoever. So I can see from my experience, and then the one just was like, your nipples are too flat, you won't succeed. But call us if you need any help. And who has time in the hospital? It's like, there was no time. And so tell me how it can look, or in my opinion, how it should look.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a huge gap between the amazing support I got with you and the very pitiful support I got in the hospital.
So first, I want to say I'm so sorry you experienced that. But the short answer is it should look supportive of breastfeeding, but that's a short answer that needs a lot of unpacking. And I think that what I've seen, so obviously I had to do my clinical hours but to become an IBCLC, and I did that in a hospital setting. It was definitely very different. Luckily, I had a great program that made me do my clinicals in different settings so that I could see the difference, because it is different worlds completely. But I think the biggest problem is in a hospital setting, you have one lactation consultant for this entire floor of patients. And breastfeeding and lactation is not a one size fits all type care. It's so personalized. It is so customized to one mother baby dyad that you can't just go in with this umbrella of information and expect it to fit every single person. And sadly, in hospitals, there's just, like I said, one, and they have all these people, and it's a checklist. It's, I've got to see this, I've got to see that, I've got to see this. Are they going to see a feeding? Who knows? Are they going to see a latch? Who knows? And then they'll try. I remember us trying, like going and saying, oh, I didn't see room, blah, 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 latch. I need to try to get back to them. Sometimes I made it and sometimes I didn't, and so you're going into this room and you're rattling off information, and that's pretty much it. You're not doing any kind of personalized care. You're not getting that opportunity. And so I think that it just becomes a job and a checklist, and it's not something I want to like throw them under the bus for, but at the same time, like it's a problem, and I wish we could find a solution to it. I think that the answer would probably be more lactation care in hospitals, so that they're maybe just assigned to so many patients, because that way they could actually get in there and give customized care. And then I also think you have the problem of, we live in America and we have Western medicine standards, and these standards just sometimes aren't super supportive of breastfeeding. One thing we learn as an internationally board certified lactation consultant is that Western medicine is not the only lens of healthcare. And we are prepared to support parents in a global perspective. And you figure out so many things that are happening in Western medicine that are just so full of interventions and unnecessary things and standards. And so it's like you were saying, they come in and they say, how much is your baby eating? It's because they're being pushed to, they have to document that baby ate every 3 hours. When in reality, a newborn baby that is 24 hours old is probably not eating that much in the first 24 hours. That's why we really push that first hour. They're going to be most alert in that first hour. And so anything beyond that, they sleep. They sleep a lot. Yes, we encourage feeding, but one of the things we really encourage is skin to skin. And so you put your baby skin to skin, and that's going to trigger all those things, but that takes time. And so if you've got somebody coming in and saying, you need to feed your baby, it's been 3 hours, you're most likely going to end up with some kind of intervention pushed on you because of a Western medicine standard. And so I think just sometimes it's that Western medicine that's not supportive.
Now, do you feel so? So one of my podcast co-hosts, she had the experience in the hospital of, she was, breastfeeding, but like on the breast. Like for my experience, I started with donor milk. Which actually was her donor milk. She donated milk to me.
Well, that's so nice.
and she was also my doula.
I love that.
But so she donated milk to me. And so I started with that because I was producing very little initially. But it was like, but to some degree, it was almost helpful for the hospital to feel more okay with it, because I could like prove this is how much like exactly that the baby is getting. But she had the experience of, feeding on the breast, which it's a more invisible, unless you're doing what you do and actually do the weighing and stuff like that after the baby eats and stuff like that, which is much more time intensive, which I'm sure very few hospitals, if any, do. But basically the nurse said, you're not allowed to leave the hospital until you make your baby eat this entire bottle of formula, because we don't think he's getting enough, because you can't prove that he's getting anything at all.
Wow.
And then she filled it with tap water that full of chlorine and fluoride, and and mixed the formula and was like, you can't leave until this, or I'm calling CPS on you and we're going to start an investigation and blah, 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 like all the threats. And so it's just, but to me, I go like, wow, that's so not supportive of breastfeeding.
Not at all.
Like,
Not at all.
because ultimately, especially probably initially, like actually having your baby on your breast is probably very helpful.
Oh, yeah.
To start the process.
And in many cases, like, the whole reason that it is very normal for babies to lose 7 to 10% of their birth weight in the first few days of life. That's normal. And so that's another thing I hear frequently is they said we were at 8%. And if we hit 10, they're going to admit us. And I'm like, if we hit 10, let's reevaluate. Let's see what's going on. There's a good chance your baby's just sleepy or your colostrum, is still just in small amounts. Let's give it time. Let's give the time for the body to adjust, for your baby being here now and making those transitions. Those transitions happen in the first few days of life. So is there a way to really measure it at that stage? Not really, but we trust our babies and we trust our bodies and we let the process happen, and sometimes that looks different for every person, but to be forced to give formula just to prove, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, and so not supportive of breastfeeding and how we're designed to work. What should have happened is they should have been able to go home, have a weight check in a few days, and see what we're looking like. Are we within normal limits of weight loss? If we're not, let's get you with lactation. Let's see what's going on. Let's really do some problem solving. But otherwise, let's trust that, if we're getting the diapers, we're getting the latching, we're getting the time at the breast, we're hearing swallows, we've got active sucking at the breast, leave it alone. Put the baby skin to skin and let the body do what it is designed to do.
Yeah. Can we talk more about skin to skin?
Oh, yeah.
Because I know you talked so much about that, and I know it's very important, and that's one that I received a lot of pushback from people on. So I had said going into it, I was like, I don't want anyone in my house in the first couple weeks. It didn't work out that way. But because I was like, we're gonna be a naked household. Sorry. It's just what's gonna happen.
I tell moms first few days of life, I'm like, just nix all the shirts, just hang out.
and initially my parents, they weren't staying with us.
Mm-hmm.
They had gone to a hotel by the time we got home, but they were still around. And so I was like, okay, I'll wear a shirt when they're around, because that's just they're very conservative. And so I was like, well, let me not completely scandalize everyone. And then after that, my friend came to stay with us to help me when my husband went back to work a little bit. And I was like, I'm sorry, like, I'm just going to tell you ahead of time, we are a hot mess.
Yep.
And I will be very limited clothing options. So be forewarned.
Yes, I love that.
And it was totally fine. But I did get a lot of pushback about skin on skin. And like my mom would say, like, would call my daughter the little streaker. And she's like, why don't you ever have her in clothes? Like, why is she never in clothes? And I'm like, well, I put clothes on her when we go out.
Yeah. But otherwise, skin to skin.
And otherwise, I
so
don't.
Good. No, yeah. So skin to skin, I call it modern day magic, because it is like one of those just magical things that happens. And so when we're putting our baby's skin to skin, we are regulating their blood pressure, their blood sugars, their body temperature. It's been proven to be more effective than like the incubators and NICUs. It's just absolute magic. It's so important. I like to call it keeping them in the kitchen, because if you're in the kitchen, you're most likely going to go for some food, at some point while you're in the kitchen. And so I'm always like, just put your baby skin to skin. If they're not acting if they're sleepy, if they're not acting super hungry, put them in the kitchen, like put them skin to skin. And that is what's going to be what triggers their innate feeding behaviors. And so putting them here is just so therapeutic in so many ways. We're also getting all these nice hormone releases and bonding, and it's incredible. And so it's so encouraged for breastfeeding specifically, even to the point. And I tell people that are going in to be a lactation consultant, and I tell them, if you're taking the test and there's any kind of question about, like, whatever, it doesn't matter what the question is. If in the responses, any of the answer possibilities is skin to skin, that's the answer. I don't care if it says, what can I do to make the sky more blue? Put the baby skin to skin. Like, I'm telling you, skin to skin is always going to be the answer. And so it's just absolute magic. There's so many benefits of skin to skin.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And then, so tell me, as this is kind of similar but separate topic, what is your opinion about hats for babies?
Hats on babies.
Yeah, like in the first 24 hours, like,
Yeah.
because like I know it's very controversial. Some are like, no, you have to keep they need to wear the hat because they need to keep the warmth in. I've even
Yeah.
heard you need to wear a hat because it'll keep your etheric forces in. And then some will say, get rid of the hat. You want to smell them as much as possible.
Yeah. Oh, I love the smell of a freshly newborn baby laying on your chest. And you just, that, if you could put that in like a candle, I would just burn it all day long.
Yeah.
But really, the skin to skin is going to be what helps regulate their body temperature. I
Mhm.
would say I'm a big fan of like trusting the body to do things unless you have a reason not to. So now, if there is a baby, we've been doing skin to skin and we're having issues with body temperature regulation, okay, fine, throw on a hat. Otherwise, I don't think it's necessary. I think that if you're
Okay.
using your own body to regulate their body temperature, and you talked about like smelling their heads, also kissing their heads. Like,
Mhm.
when we kiss our babies, we're picking up their germs, and that communicates to our body and our breast milk. And so it's how we become our own little customized feeding plan for our babies. So all of those contacts to the head and everything else, it's all important. So I would say if it's needed, use it, but otherwise probably not
Yeah.
necessary.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me more about breast milk because it's from a corporate standpoint, and this gets people get very, very upset about breastfeeding. And
Yeah.
if you're like, I'm pro breastfeeding, they're like, then you're not pro women and
Yeah.
whatever. And it's like, well, hands down, breast milk is, in the vast majority of cases, what's best for babies.
Hmm.
There might be certain circumstances. I'm not saying that there's never a
Right.
circumstance where it could be different, but in like, I don't know, the vast majority of cases, it's going to be what's best for the baby. And I think often, as far as bonding, really good too.
Yeah.
But tell me about breast milk because a lot of people will say, oh, just do formula. It's easier, it's whatever, it's kind of the same. And
Hmm.
then, you don't have to this, that, or the other. Like, I mean, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
People all have, like, there's some interesting ideas about it. But can you tell me
Yeah.
how it's different?
Yeah, so breast milk is custom made. It is designed specifically for our babies. And whether that's, even if it's not coming from you, even if it's donor milk, there's still components of breast milk that are just not there. You can't make them. I know one specific thing. There are HMOs, is what they're called, and that's just a fancy word for like these sugars that are in breast milk. Now, fun fact about this sugar is it is not digested by the baby itself. It's in the breast milk, but the baby doesn't digest the sugar. The healthy gut bacteria inside the baby is what's digesting that sugar.
Oh, interesting.
We're feeding their healthy gut.
Yeah.
We're giving them the most beautiful gut by
You're
doing that.
building their biome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you can't make that. You can't put that in formula. That is not something that can be recreated. Um, I hate when formulas are like most like breast milk, and I'm like, you're never going to be like breast milk. It's just not. Now, that is not to shame anyone who has to use formula. Formula is something. It is a tool, and it is sometimes necessary. And there's nothing wrong with formula feeding. That said, just because we can say there's nothing wrong with formula does not mean we can completely push aside the benefits of breast milk, because the breast milk is still going to be the optimal thing for our babies. It was designed for them. It was custom made for them. It's changing in composition throughout a feeding, throughout the day. It's constantly changing to meet their needs. So we're not shaming formula. We're just saying we can't recreate that. So
Mhm.
it is is just so unique in how it's made and what it does and its benefits.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So can we talk about, like, there's a lot of reasons, I think, and this isn't to say that any reason is valid or not valid, but I think that there's a lot of reasons someone might choose not to breastfeed
yeah.
or to breastfeed only a short while.
Mhm.
You know, however, I feel like, and a little bit from interacting with women online and stuff like that, and when I post about this, is I hear a lot like, oh, I just wasn't able to. I wasn't able to. I wasn't able to.
Yeah.
And I feel like in a lot of the cases they were lied to.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about, like, maybe what might be some common reasons people are told that they can't
Yeah.
breastfeed, and then what would be, like, from a physiological perspective,
Yeah.
and then what might be some reasons that um, that they actually can't, like some physiological reasons that legitimately
Yeah.
prevent them from having success with breastfeeding, like this is just not going to work.
Right.
And you know, and then I know that there's choices and emotional reasons and all of that
Yeah.
too, and those are very valid,
Absolutely.
as well, but kind of from more of like a physiological standpoint, because I know I was told, oh, your nipples are really flat, you're not going to have success, and then you came over and you're like, oh please, that's ridiculous. Like, they're not that flat. She's going to be fine. And then
Yeah.
all you did was, on the one side, I had her body kind of away from me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you were like, pushed her right into me. And all of a sudden it fixed everything. Like, it was like an inch difference. And it was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So there are very few reasons why one just cannot. And those are so rare. And sometimes it comes down to, like, I know there's one condition where there's like an allergy to the breast milk. And so obviously that would be one where we can't. Others would be maybe where our mom is on a medication that is just not safe for breastfeeding. Okay, understandable. Um, but in terms of like, you can't, it's really more like you probably can. And in some cases, we may need to do some other things too. So, like, one being my least favorite one. It breaks my heart every time I come across it. But there's it's called IGT, which is insufficient glandular tissue, and sometimes that happens. And somebody will say, "Well, you have IGT, so you're not going to be able to breastfeed," or "You had a breast reduction, so you're not going to be able to breastfeed." When in truth, just because maybe we can't reach a full supply for what we would call a full supply for our baby doesn't mean we can't reach our full supply and make up the difference with either donor milk or formula, you know. So it doesn't mean you can't breastfeed, and that's where we often kind of we get into that like level of, this is not supportive of breastfeeding. We should still be supporting breastfeeding and
Mhm.
saying, just because you have IGT doesn't mean you can't breastfeed. You can breastfeed, we just have to supplement too, and that's okay. um, there are sometimes oral things going on with babies' anatomy, you know, with their anatomy. You know, you've got ties, which is so controversial. But sometimes if there's a tie, that creates a problem. That doesn't mean you can't breastfeed. Like, we can work around that problem, whether that be like full on interventions or just, you know, positional or other little things. But there are things we can do to where you can still breastfeed. Flat nipples, positioning, using tools. A lot of people hate nipple shields, and then there are others. I see it as a tool. If it helps to get baby latching and then we can wean off of it, great, you know. But there are ways you can usually get around the reasons people are telling you you can't breastfeed. So very, very few reasons that you just can't. But so many things out there that would say, okay, this might change the way it looks in your head, but let's find what works. Let's try to help you meet your
Mhm.
goals, you know, beyond what this is.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of any amount of breast milk is breast milk. So say
Mhm.
we've got an IGT mom and she's not making a whole lot of milk. If she's giving that baby a teaspoon of milk, she's still giving her breast milk. She's giving her all those antibodies, that those HMOs we talked about. Like, we're still giving all of the benefits of breast milk. We're just adding to it. So it doesn't mean they can't do it. You know, it very few reasons for that. So
Okay.
that really kills me to hear, like, when people just tell people they can't, they're not going to be able to breastfeed. I'm like, oh, that's not true.
Yeah. Now, I do feel like one misconception is that it's natural, so it should be really, really easy, and you should just know how to do it immediately. And I don't know that that's always true.
No, if that were true, I
So,
wouldn't have a job.
right. And so I feel like in having support, you can learn the skill
Hmm.
kind of what works for you.
Hmm.
And so that was one thing, like on my journey, I got initially pushback because I had said, "Oh, I have a lactation consultant coming over," and it was maybe I don't know someone in my family. Anyways, they were very upset with me over that,
Mm.
and they were like, "Andrea, it's a natural thing. You should just be able to do it." And I said, "Well, okay, I'm not finding it that easy initially,
Yeah.
and." And I'm going like, I started almost all on donor milk because I was making very little. And I don't know how to, like, how do I wean her off of this
Hmm.
while increasing my supply? I'm like, I don't know how to do any of that.
Yeah.
Like, this has ended up being more complex than I thought. And
Yeah.
I don't want to lose my opportunity.
Yeah.
And so it's very, I find it so interesting, like the pushback about it. Either like, don't do it at all, it's whatever, or it should just be so natural and
Yeah.
it shouldn't hurt.
Ugh.
Like, if it hurts even a little bit, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. And that's, I tell people all the time when you hear breastfeeding shouldn't hurt, I'm like, there's caveats to that. Some of it, learning that skill in the first week or two, you end up with some nipple damage maybe because as much of yes, it's an instinct, it's still a skill. Like you said, you have to get the skill, you have to figure it out, baby has to figure it out. And sometimes that comes with a learning curve, and in that learning curve, damage and pain happens. Now it's important to listen to the pain and address the pain so that we can make the
Mhm.
adjustments needed. But to say that it's not supposed to hurt, like, there's caveats. There's also some people are much more sensitive, and your breasts are not used to all of this. We've got suction, we've got the vacuum of the baby's mouth, we've got moisture, and it's so frequent throughout the day that your nipples just aren't used to that. And so that takes some time. There's so many reasons it can hurt. But our goal is to get it pain free, obviously. But yeah, yes, it's natural. Yes, I'm a big fan of saying trust your baby, trust your body. But at the same time, if it was that easy, we wouldn't exist. Like, I wouldn't have a job. We would have all turned to formula a long time ago. So no, there are so many things that can pop up to make breastfeeding difficult. And I say knowledge is power. So often I have a mom maybe who got discharged from the hospital, and maybe she was in a situation where she was also trying to, like, she had been supplementing and now she wants to get baby to breast, but nobody told her she needed to be removing milk. Nobody told her, like, you need to be protecting your supply in those days while you're supplementing. And so knowledge is power. I'm a big fan of, like, getting a prenatal consult so that you can sit down and really go through how does milk supply work? What should I expect in the first few days? How do I know breastfeeding's going well? What are some flags that maybe it's not? When do I need to reach out for help? All of those things are just, and that's why I love a good prenatal, because that's just going to give
Yeah,
people that knowledge, and knowledge is power.
yeah. And I think that's huge because I think that people tend not to think about it as like a prenatal issue.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I was really excited when I hired my midwife is she's like, "Oh, I give a lot of like lactation support, and I'm going
Hmm.
to really help you do that." Um, then, I ended up not having my home birth, but
Yeah.
even so, what did I get from her after the birth? She sent me a video on breastfeeding. And I was like,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, for one, I don't have capacity to watch a video. Like, I'm so far beyond capacity
Yeah.
for watching a video. And I was like, okay, like there are some gaps in the system here because, like, in the hospital, they didn't talk about it at all.
Yeah.
And then my midwife, who was this big, I'm going to support breastfeeding. And then I got a video.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's not exactly, that's not super helpful for me.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like that mind frame of, oh, well, it's natural. It's gonna be easy. Leads us to not actually get that support because we think we're not gonna need it. And so
Right. Or like, and I think some people say too, like, oh, well, it should be so easy and I'm having a hard time. Therefore, maybe I should just quit, or maybe I'm bad at it, or, and then I feel like people get told that their bodies are broken too.
I know.
And I just think that that's so wrong. It's like your body's not broken. We all need support in different ways. And that's a really positive thing.
Yeah. And so often, those first few weeks are difficult. And people immediately just have this idea that they failed at breastfeeding. And I'm like, no. Let's get the support. Let's get where we need to be, and we'll reach the goals. Like that,
Yeah.
just because it starts off a little rocky doesn't mean it's going to end rocky. I can't
Yeah.
tell you how many times I've had people who you start off and you've got so many things against you, but by the last time I say goodbye to them, they're fully exclusively breastfeeding, and I'm just like, look at you met your goals. Like, and it's so
Yeah.
nice, and I'm like, remember when you were crying and you thought this was over? I'm like, here we are. So just because you have a rough start doesn't mean that's setting a tone for anything.
Yeah.
We can work through things. So
Yeah. And I really love that. And I would be an example of that, at least to some degree. I don't know if I struggled as much as some people did, but it was
yeah.
definitely a challenging start. And then my daughter did have tongue ties.
Yeah.
And I think maybe lip ties too. I can't remember. But she had some
Yes.
ties for sure. And
Yes.
then a little bit into it, I developed Raynaud's,
Yes.
which made it really painful for a while. And then, but finally, once we got through all of that, it was,
Mhm.
I don't know, when did it actually start getting really, really easy for me? Probably around 7.5 months.
Yeah.
It was all of a sudden like, oh, okay, this is really easy. This is fun.
Yes.
I have finally got this.
I use you as my poster child a lot. Not saying your name ever, obviously, because I protect your privacy. But I'm always like, hey, listen, just because a tie is there, just because this is here, this is here, this is here, does not mean we need to do any intervention. Does not mean this is not going to work out. And I'm always like, this particular person is still breastfeeding. Like
You have to
we've
be
got through
determined, though. You
all
have
of the
to be
things.
determined.
Absolutely,
Because I
absolutely.
will say the only point in time, it was at some point when I had been a few months with the Raynaud's, and it was just like
Yeah.
stabbing pain. Like I could feel it like shooting into my toes
Oh,
on
goodness.
every feed on the one side. And that it was like Simeon had said at that point, he's like, oh, yeah, 2 years, Andrea, 2 years. And I'm like, don't even talk to me about 2 years right
Yeah.
now. I'm like, let's talk about till a year, because I think I was at like 5 months right then. I'm
Yeah.
like, I can deal if I have to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, we need to sort this out. I'm like, right now I can think to a year. I'm like,
Yeah.
I can manage this till then. But then once that went away, I'm like, okay, yeah, now we can talk 2 years and beyond.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
It definitely takes some determination to get past some of the challenges.
yeah. Yeah. So, can you talk about some of the, and we've already kind of talked about some of it, but
Mm-hmm.
some of the common misconceptions?
Yeah.
And one I have in my mind was, this was literally on someone's TikTok. Okay. They had
Okay.
two pinned videos.
Okay.
And one is, this is the pump I use to get my supply up.
Okay.
This is the supplement I'm using to decrease my oversupply. And it's literally like on the same page,
Yeah.
like side by side pinned. And
Wow.
I'm going, okay, I feel like people have confusion
Yes.
about like how much do you need to work to get your supply up,
Yeah.
but stuff like that. I'm going, like, to me that's so nonsensical. It's like, did you pumped so much and now you have an oversupply,
Yeah.
and like you kind of created your own problem.
Exactly. Yes. There's a big misconception about supply and what is an adequate supply. I can't tell you. We actually even and we always want to validate a parent's concerns, but we have a chart button where we're putting in our chief complaint of what is the reason for this visit, and there is one called perceived low supply, because the truth is we cannot say this is a low supply because it's perfectly adequate, but the patient thinks it's low. And so we have to we go in and we educate and we say, you're making just enough, you're making enough. That's all you need. And so yes, we get asked all the time, what can I do? Like, especially the first few weeks of life. And it's like, what can I do to get my supply up? And I'm like, well, your baby's growing well. Your supply's not low. Yeah, but I don't have anything extra. You don't need anything extra. Your supply's good, And what happens is social media is a monster when it comes to this. You've
Yeah.
got these people showing their freezers full of milk, and they're like, how do I get this? And I'm like, trust me, you don't want that. I'm like, that is a ball and chain to a breast pump, a one-way ride to increased risk of clogged ducts and mastitis. Like, that's not something you want. It's somebody's telling you want that. That's not what you want. And now I still totally understand wanting to have a little bit of milk on standby, because you never know what can happen. What happens if something happens to me? What happens if I need to do something and I got to send my baby to a sitter? So yes, we work through, like, what can we do to help it get a little bit, but the last thing we want to do is try to talk somebody into how to create an oversupply. So yes, and that's, again, goes back to, like, the prenatal and the knowledge is power, and understanding how milk supply works and what is adequate and what is needed versus what's not needed, what can lead to more issues down the road, like an oversupply. And so lots of misconceptions in the realm of supply, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, another one I know that you had mentioned to us very early on was people talk a lot about nipple confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you do end up having some bottle feeding, and I know we were considering that for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
and then ended up just never doing it.
Yeah.
It was like in part to actually go to the effort of buying bottles that just was like too much for me. So I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's probably easier and whatever to just not.
Yeah.
And we kind of got through the like really rough sleep patch there for a
Mm-hmm.
while. And then I was like, oh, okay, I can do this now. This is,
Yeah.
I'm managing.
Yeah.
Um, but what was my point? So flow,
Nipple
but you had said
confusion.
it's flow confusion.
Yes. So the term nipple confusion is really just a term that's actually a flow preference issue. So what happens is babies suck on a bottle and the breast slightly different. And oftentimes you see people, I wish I had like my little demo baby, but you see people hold their babies like this in a bottle like this. And if we're
Mm-hmm.
doing this, gravity is just doing all the work for them. That flow is just right there for them to just not even really have to work for it. And so what happens, they start to realize, I have this silicone in my mouth. I don't have to work for it. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to work for it at the breast anymore. And so babies develop a flow preference, which then leads them to have a hard time getting back on the breast. And so people say, well, that's nipple confusion. It's a flow preference. They've figured out this is easier. And so they're sticking with that, because even though, yeah, they're not complexly breaking down the thought like I just said it, that's initially actually what's happening. So that is kind of what we want to avoid. So what we do is we try to help people to learn how to bottle feed in a way that's going to still be supportive of breastfeeding. So we teach paced bottle feeding. We use slow flow nipples. We don't ever, big misconception is, I need to go ahead and buy nipples in 1, 2, 3, so that as they grow, they go. If you're breastfeeding, there's no need to ever change that nipple flow. Like, keep that nipple flow slow, because your breast isn't going to change. So why should we change the nipple on the bottle?
Mm-hmm.
So paced bottle feeding, slow flow nipples, lots of skin to skin between feedings, all those things should keep a baby going back and forth pretty without issue.
Yeah.
Now, again, everybody's different. And there have been the few that they took a bottle and they didn't want to go back. And there's really no explanation for that, but it's very rare, very, very rare. And
Okay.
that's why we teach the paced bottle feeding.
Yeah. Are there any other really common misconceptions that you hear of?
Yes.
And what
So
would some of them be?
I don't want to get too much on like a TED Talk rant on this one, but
You can do a TED Talk.
this one's driving me crazy just recently. I actually did a whole rant on my Facebook page the other day about it. To be told that babies need to be timed at the breast, or that if your baby's wanting to go to the breast frequently, that means there's a problem. And back to the being timed at the breast, that your baby's burning calories if they're at the breast for too long. Kind of makes my head want to explode. Especially like when somebody's telling me, yeah, my pediatrician told me that 15 minutes per breast and to take them off because otherwise they're just burning calories. And I'm like, no. Babies are going to go to the breast frequently. It is very normal for a baby to take anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour at the breast in the first 2 weeks of life. That's just common. You have to think when a baby has just been born, they have been in the womb. There's a wasp flying near me.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm like, wait, there's what's in the womb?
Oh, goodness.
No.
Anyway, they've just come from the womb. So their instinct for everything is the breast. And sorry. Their instinct is the breast. So, are we hungry? Go to the breast. Are we thirsty? Go to the breast. Did we just fart? Go to the breast. Do we need to poop? Go to the breast. Are
Yeah.
we sad? Go to the breast. Are we scared? Go to the breast. Let a baby be a baby. Put them to the breast, And it really kills me when they say, "Oh, but they're going to burn calories," because that's not a thing. They're not burning calories. They're now, if there is a problem where they're not getting calories, that's a whole separate issue, and that's not meaning take them off the breast because they're burning calories. So there's really no need for babies to be timed at the breast, and I've even had a pediatrician tell a parent space your feedings out to every 3 hours in the first 2 weeks of life, and I'm like, that is insane. Like, that is going against all of the biological norms of trusting our babies and their feeding cues.
Yeah. I had
One of the
someone tell me that too.
It's
She's like, you
wild.
really ought to like time the spaces in between, like,
Yeah, and that's
because
just
she's fed
simply
like
not
twice
important.
in the same hour. She was a little bit older at this point,
Yeah,
but
and
she was like, you really need to, even if she's crying and screaming and just wanting that and nothing else, you need to make her wait. And
yeah,
I was like, no, I don't think so.
yeah, and I'm so glad that you trusted the way you're designed, you know. But yeah, that one really gets me, and if anything, we're almost limiting their calories by doing that because babies, when they're brand new, they do speed at a slower pace. They also have to work a little bit harder because we're working on colostrum. Colostrum is thick. It's like a honey-like consistency. Babies really have to work to get the colostrum. It takes longer, and that's okay. That's not a problem. The only time it's a problem is if we're getting weight loss percentages that are a little bit higher. Maybe we're not hitting peas and poops the way we're supposed to. Then we will reevaluate. And then if we need to time a baby for time's sake and to get a supplement, okay. But there's no reason we should be telling parents to do this without evidence that there's a problem. We need that evidence to show us that there's a reason to do that, because otherwise we're going against everything that's actually completely normal. Um, so that one's a big hot topic for me because
Yeah.
babies want to be at the breast, and we need to let them. We need to let them do what they do. And in fact, too, first few days of life, we have what we call cluster feeding, and some babies are queuing to be at the breast every hour during that time. That's a normal newborn feeding pattern, and there's a reason behind it. By going to the breast more frequently, they are telling your body, this colostrum has been great, but let's bring in the milk. Let's get the milk coming in. Let's increase volume. When they're going through growth spurts, they go to the breast more frequently because they're not doing the same amount every time, and they're going to steadily increase their volumes as they gain weight. So how do they do that? The breast. They communicate to the body and tell the body what they need.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really important to listen to those things. And unless there's a reason that we need to intervene, trusting that our baby's queuing at the breast means they need to go to the breast. And throwing out things like, I'm going to drop a big one here, Mom's on call. I'd love to burn every copy in a huge bonfire and just watch it burn. They start limiting feedings as early as 8 weeks. And I'm like, why are we denying a feeding? Why are we telling babies they can't feed when they're queuing to tell us they want it? Let them have it. Let them be
Yeah.
babies.
Yeah. And so there is something, so I don't know, I was listening to a podcast. It was a midwife, and I think she was also a lactation consultant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she was in California, but she was talking about how there are lobbyists in Washington for the formula companies who are there specifically to promote short maternity leaves for women, to make them as short as possible. Like,
Why?
because it inhibits breastfeeding. And she's like, whoa, she's like, that's crazy, because I think she got involved politically, and I can't even remember her name. It was some podcast I listened to. But she had gotten involved politically, like to try and support um, women and moms who have children and are in the workforce. And like, how can we make this workable for people and all of that? And she actually was like, wow, I didn't know, but there are lobbyists who
Yeah,
are like, no, 6 weeks is too long, make it 4 weeks, and all moms have to go back to work.
that's wild.
And stuff
Not,
like that. And I'm going, that's crazy.
yeah,
And I don't
not,
know that it's true, but I wouldn't doubt it.
yeah. Not to get too like provocative, but I mean, if we're not even cleared to have intercourse for 6 weeks, why should we be going back to work at 6 weeks? That's insane. Um, yeah, honestly, statistically speaking, you look at so many times and you ask a parent when did they stop breastfeeding, it's when they went back to work, because we are interrupting that natural process where we're having to replace our time at the breast with a pump, with a machine, and our babies are not communicating with our bodies as much. We're not syncing up like we were before. Doesn't mean you cannot successfully go back to work and breastfeed, because you absolutely can, but statistically speaking, there's so many who stop at that point. So
Yeah.
the fact that there are people saying let's shorten it when in reality we need to be making it longer, that ugh, just
Yeah.
boils my
Yeah.
blood.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's like, women and moms, they just need all the support that they can. And I feel
Yeah.
like you get to live your life however you want. And,
Yeah.
but even with employers, it's like it takes a lot of compassion and working with things to make it an easy, seamless transition.
Yeah.
More so.
Yeah.
It may never be perfectly seamless, but to make it easier.
Right. Do our best.
Right. So are there any other misconceptions kind of that are on your mind?
Out on my mind at the moment, no, but it's probably something I could unpack a lot of stuff on if I sat up for a while. but yeah, just that whole the big one is that babies wanting to be at the breast frequently means there's a problem. Like, no, that's just babies being babies.
That's babies being babies. Yeah.
Yep, let
But
babies
that's,
baby.
that's something interesting too. I have found, like, my daughter was 3 days old and already there was like talk of her needing to be more independent.
Yeah,
And I'm like, she's 3 days old.
yeah.
Independence is not really the goal here.
No, no. We want them to be dependent right now. We want to take
Right.
care of them. Yeah.
Like, and even though as she's gotten older, but there was talk of like, well, you're being too protective of her, like she needs to get germs and she needs to get, I'm like, well, one, she was born at the hospital, so she's been exposed to all kinds already, for sure. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, one day she's going to be eating the floor and eating dirt, and I'm like,
Not
yeah,
today.
but that's not today.
Not today.
When she's wanting to do that, then her immune system will have self-determined that she's
Yes.
ready to do that, and then we'll
Absolutely.
go forward with it. Let's talk about breastfeeding in public.
Oh. Man, how long do I get on this?
As long as you want.
First and foremost, breastfeeding is not nudity. Breastfeeding is not disrespectful. I don't care what the setting is. I don't care where you are. I don't care if there's children. I don't care if there's government officials. Breastfeeding is not disrespectful. It's not inappropriate. It's not shameful. Um, if if you would put a bottle in a baby's mouth in that setting, there's absolutely no reason you cannot put a breast in their mouth in that setting. And there is no reason to tell somebody they need to cover up, because breasts are meant for feeding babies. Society has sexualized breasts, but that's not what breasts are for. Breasts are for our babies. that they're for feeding. That's how we were designed. And I'll even go so far as to say, like, this is an opinion that is not an opinion people get to have, because it's not an opinion. It's a fact. It's an anatomical fact. Like, this is what they're for. So I would tell people who think it's disrespectful, inappropriate, shameful, reevaluate why you think that. Where did that thought come from? Who put it in your head that that's wrong? And let's reframe it, because the truth is these were made for feeding our babies. So there's no reason we shouldn't be able to do them in any setting, and especially when we've been talking about how we trust our babies and we trust our bodies and we feed on demand. Why would we deny just because of where we are? Breastfeeding in public is that one really gets me. It's something
Yeah.
I got shamed for at times. It's I've sat with parents crying over it. It it's so unsupportive of something that should be so supported, and I could talk on that all day.
Yeah. Now, for people who, let's say, get the cops called on them or
You are
things like
protected.
that.
You
Yeah.
are
And
protected.
now that's every state in the US,
Yes.
right? And I believe everywhere in Canada as well,
Yep.
and probably most places in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about some of the other countries. It may
Yep.
differ in certain places, but
Yeah, you are protected. You have a right to breastfeed wherever you want to. There's no law saying that you can't. So when you're asked to be removed from places or you're told you're going to get the call, go for it. I'm exercising my rights and I'm feeding my baby. And then if anybody ever tells you to go to a bathroom to feed your baby, tell them to go eat their lunch in the bathroom. You know, it's wild. I love the meme of it says somebody told me to cover up while breastfeeding and they covered their head. They just continued. And I'm like, yep, pretty much. Because if anything, and what kills me is when they're approaching these people that are breastfeeding and they're saying this, they're trying to like put shame on them when the real shame is the fact that they're so unsupportive of a biological norm. You know,
Mhm.
it's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the more we can normalize breastfeeding, it's a
Yes.
positive thing.
Actually, just
Um,
recently, I went to a conference at Emory, and they were talking about there's an initiative going on in some cities where they are putting things in like parks and things like that to normalize breastfeeding, because like the more we can just make it normal, the more people can feel comfortable. And so I love that initiative is happening. I would love for it to start here.
yeah.
I took down the woman's information who was talking about it, because I want to be like,
Mhm.
how can I get this implemented in Chattanooga? Like,
Yeah.
I want this. I want this
Yeah.
here. So I have not reached out to her yet, but I plan to, because
No, that's really cool. I
yeah,
love that.
I've been
Yeah.
getting through wedding season first.
No, that makes sense.
Yep.
One other one that I feel like is very controversial is extended feeding.
Yes.
And that can, I guess, vary. Some people consider it to be past 6 months. Some people will say past a year.
Mm-hmm.
I had someone recently tell me to breastfeed past 2 is just icky and wrong. And so, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I do feel
Absolutely.
like that's the other one where you get a lot
Absolutely.
of ideas. Like once they have their first tooth,
Yeah.
cut them off.
You could just give it to them in a cup.
Once they have solid food,
Yeah.
once I don't
So
know.
that is definitely more of a westernized viewpoint. You go to other countries and people are breastfeeding their children sometimes up to 5 to 7 years old. I think it's Japan. They
Mhm.
ask if a child is weaned before they start kindergarten, because it's normal. Like, and honestly, like there are zero studies that show that there are any kind of psychological effects that would cause any kind of sexual issues growing up. Like, if babies are just being fed at the breast, that's all they see them as. If anything, I think it can help correct some of the society norms that we've come up with in our heads, that breasts are so sexualized, because it changes that. And so there's nothing wrong with breastfeeding, extended breastfeeding. If anything, Go to any restaurant right now and pull up the kids menu. What's on it? Chicken fingers,
Yeah,
mac and
fries.
cheese.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm not saying don't give your kids that, because I was the parent who was like, I'm never going to give our kids McDonald's. And then I'm like, y'all want a Happy Meal? But you know what? I was also breastfeeding. So they were getting everything they needed, like in terms of nutrients, vitamins, things like that. I knew they were getting good stuff. So even if I was going to give them some garbage, I'm going to give them good stuff too. So it is always going to be beneficial for babies to have breast milk, or children to have breast milk. Um, there's nothing wrong with it. So I would say you do what's comfortable for you. You make your decisions based on that. There's going to be somebody with an opinion on it. Do what works for you. I know I personally, I think my middle child was past 3 when we stopped. And the only reason I stopped with him, so I was breastfeeding tandemly with, I had my babies 14 months apart. That was another misconception actually there, is that you need to stop breastfeeding while you're pregnant. My doctor kept telling me, have you stopped breastfeeding yet? Have you stopped breastfeeding yet? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to. No, I'm not going to. And then it was hilarious because I was in the labor room and in labor, and he walked in. He's like, so you never stopped breastfeeding? Because my other child was literally latched on. I was like, and here we are, full term. So, but yeah, I breastfed them. And the only reason I stopped was because I was going on a 10-day cruise. And I didn't want to have to pump. But I would have kept going, to be honest. But they were also to the point, they were kind of self-weaning. We were down to just nighttime, so it wasn't something I was emotionally tied to anymore. But, had that cruise not, who knows how long we would have gone. That cruise was just like the thing that was like, hey, do you want to take a breast pump on a cruise? Nope.
No, not really.
And they are 2 and 3 and we're good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say, find what works for you, what feels okay to you.
Yeah.
And if at any point you start feeling uncomfortable with it, okay, stop, but otherwise people are going to people, unfortunately, and just kind of shut them out and know that what you're doing is still giving your child good nutrients, good vitamins, good stuff. Because breast milk's fine.
Yeah.
I'm
So
convinced we're going to find the cure for cancer in breast milk.
Oh yeah, I think it's like the moms who are so. It's actually a funny story. So my sister, her neighbor, had called her
Mm-hmm.
and was like, "Me and my kids all have pink eye. Can you come outside and we're all gonna come by and can you just squirt some breast milk in all of our eyes?" We're just gonna come by a few times a day. Do you mind doing that?
That's hilarious. Oh my goodness.
And my sister's like, okay.
Yeah, we're always just like, put some breast milk on it. It's pretty magical stuff.
Right? Yeah, it's just even like on a cut or something like that. I'm like, wow, it feels so quick. But yeah, talk a little bit about tandem feeding, because that's also one I feel like doesn't happen very often. And I think also people get told, ooh, if you're breastfeeding, it's the nipple stimulation, you're going to go into labor early.
Yeah. And so I'm not a doctor, so I won't tell people that's not true. I think there's cases where that could be a possibility. So I think if you're in a high risk situation, consult with your doctor. And then if they are, like my doctor, he straight up told me, he said, I'm just giving you this statement to cover in case something happened, And I was like, fair enough. He's like, I have to tell you this. Cool. I'm going to keep doing it because I know I'm not in any kind of risk. So I kept doing it. But yeah, tandem feeding, I think the biggest challenge with tandem feeding is sometimes when pregnancy happens, your estrogen levels go up so much that milk supply can tank. Actually, some of the most common calls I get during lactation is, hey, my supply is just really dropped. I don't know what's going on. And kind of we go through all the things that that could have happened. And I'll say, like, is there any chance you're pregnant? And they're like, no. And they call me a week later and they're like, hey, so actually. So, sometimes that happens, and that's one of the most common reasons somebody would go ahead and wean while they were pregnant. But if you're able to keep up with your supply, and with me, I did not have as much knowledge as I have now, and I have no idea what was happening. Nothing changed, so we just kept going.
Yeah.
I look back on it now and I'm like, I wish I knew what I knew, but at the same time, I really am glad that everything went so seamlessly, because I really trusted my babies and my bodies. I feel like had I known everything, I would have been a little bit more like analytical. But even just like when it came to like, I had a newborn and a toddler, breastfeeding them, and I'm like, how did we do that? How did we structurize that? Like, and the best thing you do, offer the newborn first, make sure they're getting what they need. But it's funny because I look back, I'm like, did I do that? Like, whatever we did, it worked.
It worked.
Yeah. So my body made plenty of milk for both my babies. And of course the toddler was also eating complementary foods too at that point, so that probably had a lot to do with it. But even then, like, our babies our bodies are designed to do stuff like, so if we have twins, we can tandem breastfeed. Like, it's something our bodies are meant to do. So I'd say just make sure you're monitoring it, make sure everything's going the way it should go, and trust your baby, trust your body. It's like my motto.
Yeah. And I love that, because I think our bodies are so brilliant, as are the bodies of our children. And there's so much in that connection. And
Yes, they
like,
sync
there's
up.
just so much there. And like, like, I hate that so many women leave birth feeling like they're broken.
Yeah. And
Or
our
like
bodies
things just don't work.
Yeah, and our bodies sync with our babies to the point that if you're in a room with a baby and y'all are sleeping, you get up to go to the bathroom, more than likely your baby's going to wake up too. Because even your baby's breathing is synced to your breathing. And that's a whole other topic. We have the sleep the sleep requirements of our country that tell us you should never bed share. And there are safe ways to bed share, and bed sharing promotes breastfeeding. So, there's ways to do it. It's very controversial, but there's ways to do it. And other countries are teaching those safe ways to do it. So, our country says don't do it. But there's, I always encourage people. So if somebody is listening who's interested in those, go to the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine and look up their protocols. There is a protocol for safe bed sharing and breastfeeding, and it gives you all the information of how to safely do it while still breastfeeding and everything. So I think it's important to give that information and not gatekeep that information,
Well, yeah. And I think it makes it easier to breastfeed.
Absolutely.
It's less getting up, and
yeah, like I was saying,
it just makes it simpler.
We're synced to our babies. So
yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah. We live in a culture of such disconnection.
Yeah.
And this is definitely one way that we can bring some connection back.
Absolutely.
And all of that. But okay. Starting to hear a little mild screaming downstairs, not really screaming, just squawking. But tell me, what goes into the training for the certification that you have? Because I feel like people don't understand, but I looked it up and it's significant.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hours. Like, it could take, it's like years of a process.
I started doing prerequisites at some point, because your prerequisites so there's different pathways. I'm an IBCLC. There are different certifications. There's a CLC, and then there's like a peer counselor, and so they kind of go up. The IBCLC is kind of the top certification, unless you're going to go so far as to be like a doctor of breastfeeding medicine, which I would love to do, but
that's really cool. I didn't actually know that existed.
It does.
That's really cool.
I would be so interested in doing it if I wasn't 40 and
oh, it's
so
never too late though. It's never too late.
I might be going back. I do plan to do some. I'm hoping to keep going and pursue being a nurse practitioner at some point. But the thought of medical school, that's enough to make me too stressed to want to do that. Otherwise, very cool. And had I figured out my career path early, I probably would have done that. But yeah, so to be an IBCLC, there's 3 different pathways. One is if you're already like a recognized medical professional. When I say recognized, it means recognized by the IBLCE, the people who make the certification happen. And so that can include like a nurse, a nutritionist, a speech pathologist. And so if you're already some of these professions, then you add on to your education, you get some clinical hours, and then that makes you eligible to sit for the test. The pathway I did was more of so like full on educational route. It was a program where we had our semesters broken up into, our education. And then we also had to have so many hours of clinical hours, which was a lot. And then we were eligible to sit for the test after that. And then there's also the pathway that is a mentorship, which is where you get with someone and you follow them and they teach you. That one is really, really difficult to find because it's a lot of work for the actual mentor. So it's really hard to find somebody that has the time and ability to do that. But the end goal is to be eligible to sit for that test. And then once you sit for that test, you certify. So yeah, it's quite a bit. It's some extensive education that is fully in lactation. So it's quite the process. I think it took me, with my prerequisites and the program and everything, probably 4 years total.
Okay.
And that was building on some education that I'd done straight out of high school that luckily did not expire, such as like math and English and things like that. But like any science courses expire within 5 years. So your biologies, your anatomy and physiologies, things like that. And you do have to have those before you're even able to get into that lactation centered program. So it was pretty extensive.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's something people often don't realize.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely significant.
Yeah.
But yeah, is there anything else that you want to share? Anything kind of
My wasp friend is back.
anything that the wasp would like to share? No.
Right? I think the biggest thing is kind of what I've been saying is like trust your baby, trust your body. These are natural things. At the same time, trust your instincts. If you feel like something is off, if you feel like something is wrong, even if a doctor's telling you everything's fine, but you feel like something is off, just reach out. And, not everything does go perfectly. Sometimes there are reasons that we need some help. And so just reach out and get that help, or reach out and get that reassurance, even if it's just, I love what I call a well baby visit, where somebody just says, hey, I delivered. I just want to make sure. I think we're doing fine. Can you just confirm that for me? I love a good peace of mind visit where I just go in and say, all right, yeah, you're hitting all the things you're supposed to be hitting. Your baby's within normal limits of weight loss or is gaining adequately. Your baby has adequate diaper output. Like your latch looks great. I love to be able to reassure and just let you know, hey, you're doing what needs to happen. And I think that just gives confidence, because with that knowledge, that it just builds the confidence. The more you have the confidence, the more you learn to trust your body, trust your baby. I think the hardest is with a new mom and a first baby. And when we can really give them confidence, we're empowering them so much. So I just love to let them know, yeah, you're right. Everything's going great. Or if it's not, let's find out what it is and let's help you reach that goal. Like, let's get you there. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I do love that, because I do
yeah.
feel like a lot of new moms get told so much, like, oh no, you're wrong. Oh this,
Yeah.
oh that. Or okay, I have one other question that just popped into my head.
Yeah.
What do you say to the people who, because I hear this a lot too, and it happened to me, is when a mom is like, I need my baby, I need to feed my baby.
Mhm.
And someone around them is like, no, you don't. The baby's not hungry, and takes them away.
Well, I feel like I'd probably catch a charge for how I would actually react. But I think that's ridiculous. Babies are meant to be with their mommies. Like, that is their space. And if you're withholding a baby from their parent, that's really, really, really shameful on the person doing it. And I would say, just hold your ground and say, give me my baby, and do whatever you need to do to make sure you get your
I
baby
had
in
a
a
hard
safe
time with
manner.
that, because I had lost my voice, most of my voice, and I
Yeah.
had a C-section and couldn't walk by myself.
Mm.
And so it was taken advantage of. And my baby was taken upstairs and the door was closed.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they
And if that
claimed,
happens,
oh, Andrea, I just didn't hear you. And I'm like, well, that's a load of BS, but okay.
and if that happens in a hospital setting, especially if it's a medical professional doing it, you need to reach out to the patient advocacy and make sure it's being addressed, because they do have the patient advocacy. I don't know what it's called, representative, but they're there to help you, to be able to advocate for you, because you shouldn't lose your voice in a medical setting for any reason, especially when it comes to your baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, I love that. And I think that yeah, it's huge.
yeah.
We all have to be able to keep our voices.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, anyways, oh my goodness, I love this so much. Thank
Me
you.
too.
Thank you so much for coming on and for sharing.
Absolutely.
And I'll get all of your information and I'll put it in the show notes for anyone who wants to connect. And I'll put the business that you work for here in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
So anything you want to share, I will make sure gets included so people can connect with you should they wish to.
Perfect.
And but yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you to everyone for listening. And yeah, and I'm super excited for where our voices will take us
Yes, thank you
in
for having me.
the next episodes too. So, but this was fabulous. I'm super excited, and I'm so glad this worked out.
Yes, me too. It was good to see you guys.
Yeah, it was good to. Well, I'll let you go before the boss gets you. Thank you so much for listening. If you are loving this podcast, please go ahead and subscribe and leave us a review. Both of these really help the show. As you go out into the world this week, know that we are sending you so much love and wishing you a wonderful and beautiful day, and we will see you back here soon.